special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts from ICT's annual international conference.
Good morning, everybody. We would like to start. Well, as you can see, we have a lot of competition with other workshops. Some of them are very popular today, dealing with ISIS and other stuff. But those who are here are dedicated and interested in the subject matter of this specific workshop, which is the threat of terrorism to the health industry. It's not obvious why a Counter-Terrorism Institute is dealing with such a subject matter. It's not obvious because if you go over the and review all the articles that have been written about terrorism, you can hardly find any article. I'm talking about the counterterrorism community. You can hardly find any article that was written on that specific subject matter. Here and there are a few people who are writing on that. ICT is involved, or should I say, was dragged to be involved in this subject matter. Started 2 years ago, even more than that. And the one to blame is Dr. Miriam Halperin, Wernli, that came to me a little bit more than 2 years ago and said she's very concerned with many aspects of the threats of infiltration of terrorist organizations into the health industry. Being in this field many years, she is and was very aware to this specific threat and to the security gaps and the fragile security systems in the health industry. And once I learned about this industry from Miri, I immediately understood the real need to have an in-depth process of exploring those threats and trying to find new solutions for those threats. So some of you already have been in previous conferences of ICT, and in the last 2 years we dedicated one workshop to this subject matter and with other issues that we've discussed. And we decided to do this again in this conference. From year to year, although the title is practically the same title, the threat of terrorism to the health industry, the content is changing. Miri and I was conducting and actually still updating a very interesting in-depth research on the involvement of terrorist organization in the medicine industry, counterfeit medicines. And we have found that Hezbollah is deeply involved in those kind of activities. And I can tell you that the research that we conducted was an avant-garde in this field. And even those that has the responsibility to monitor Hezbollah, to monitor those type of activities, and I'm talking about government people, not just in Israel, worldwide, were surprised from the finding that we have found and we presented last year, so I will not repeat them this year, but anyone who's interested and didn't have the chance to read the articles and the material that we have produced, Miri and I will be more than happy to share this with you. Our work in the counterfeited medicine industry led us to be acquainted to a unique person who's sitting next to Miri, and this is Miki Arieli. And Miki, excuse me for saying that, you don't hear me, is a genius in this field of counterfeit medicines. He's almost dedicated his whole life to this subject matter. I'll present him later on, but he's the head of the department in the health ministry in Israel was responsible for that. And through Miki and through Miri, we had the opportunity to meet Benoît and Yoram that will present today their presentation. Shmulik is a different acquaintance. Shmulik is an old ICT senior fellow, and until his last position, he was the deputy deputy director of Hadassah Hospital, and very knowledgeable in those fields. So we have the privilege to have today really the top-notch experts, not just in Israel, from different countries, dealing with this important subject matter of the threat of terrorism to the health industry. I was meeting many people in the last year in Israel trying to raise their awareness to this threat. So again, we don't need to persuade the people behind these desks. But when we talk about decision makers, even when we talk about directors of hospitals in Israel, when I came to them and said, you know, there is a threat, a terrorist threat to your facilities, to your industry, they didn't really understood. They didn't really identify with the magnitude of the threat, with the content of the threat. And it took me time to persuade them. But then, my staff at ICT showed me a short video clip, which was a stunning video clip. And I took this video clip, and I went with that to the next meetings I had with heads of hospitals and different systems in Israel, and I showed it to them, and the whole atmosphere changed. Immediately, they got the message. Unfortunately, when you see those pictures, you cannot ignore nor the level of the threat, the magnitude of the threat, and the immediate need to find solutions to those security gaps, which we will discuss today. So in order to raise your attention in this morning, I would like to start by showing you this video clip. About 5 minutes video clip. It's quite a difficult one to see, but I think it's important for us to see it because it will put us in the right mood and atmosphere for our discussion. The video clip that I'm going to show you is a video clip on an attack that was conducted this year by Al-Qaeda fraction. This is ACAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula. Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula is one of the most notorious terrorist organizations. Now ISIS is very popular, but Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula until recently was the worst, most notorious splinter of Al-Qaeda Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda of Bin Laden and Zawahiri. And Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula was conducting attacks all over the world. Most of the attacks that occurred in the Western society after 9/11 were not being planned and executed by Bin Laden or Zawahiri. It was planned and executed by Al-Awlaki, which was heading Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula. I'm talking in past terms because the Americans saw to it that he would be a deceased and killed him. So Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, on top of executing and exporting terrorist attacks all over the world, in United States, I'm talking about the shoe bomber, I'm talking about the underwear bomber, the Fort Hood shooting, the Christmas attack, and so on and so forth, all came from the printers attack, all came from Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula in Yemen. But on a day-to-day basis, they are conducting an ongoing insurgency in Yemen itself. It's not very well known. The media doesn't pay a lot of attention. But then they attacked a hospital in Yemen. And we have a unique opportunity to see in the video clip how everything started and how everything developed. You would see in the beginning, something is happening in the gate of the hospital. We have, most of the pictures are being taken from CCTVs inside the hospital and outside the hospital. So you see something is happening in the gate of the hospital, and then a car, later to be known as a car bomb, is getting inside the hospital and being blown in the main entrance of the hospital. But the terrorists didn't stop there. After the car bomb, they stormed into the hospital and they assassinated brutally the staff, the doctors, the nurses, and patients that were there. And all is being caught on the CCTVs, and I'll show you that before we get into the presentations and discussions themselves. I see. Thank you.
صبيحة يوم الخميس الباردة كان الهدوء يعم المكان إلا من حركة دائبة لعدد من الأطباء والممرضين، وهم يحاولون بذل كل جهد لتقديم الخدمات الطبية لمجموعة من المرضى الذين
This is the hospital before the attack.
هنا في مجمع مستشفى العرضي كانت الحياة تدب في أركان المستشفى بين طبيب يفحص وآخر يجري عملية إنقاذ للروح وثالثة تخفف من وجع مريضها. هنا اشترك أطباء من اليمن مع أطباء من جنسيات أخرى في عملية واحدة إنسانية الهدف والغاية.
Is just here. Now you can see something is happening there. You see the arrows. This person is looking back. There is a fire out there. People are running away. He's a brave person. He's still standing and watching.
تحركت سيارة الموت
Here you can
على
see people
متنها
running.
نفر خلعوا إنسانيتهم وآدميتهم خلفهم، وبدأ الموت ينهار رصاصا على الجنود الذين كانوا يأملون أن يواجهوا عدوهم باللغة التي عرفوها في
People inside the hospital starts to understand that something is wrong. They are looking from the windows.
السيارة الحاجز
And this is the car bomb
إلى حيث
getting
كان
in.
المرضى يئنون ألما ووجعا.
The car bomb going to another entrance of the hospital. That's the other entrance and being blown up. Look what happened to the people which are watching. Here it is.
فكيف بغيره. انفجار دوى صوته عاليا وتعالت أدخنته ونيرانه السوداء ملبدة
Terrorist units are storming into the building and execute everybody inside.
المجاني عبر ما يشبه الإنسان في هيئته وما يختلف عنه في هويته. تسلل لصوص الأرواح إلى
People are looking around
وبدأت
and being killed.
معركتهم الخاسرة. قتل لكل شيء
Here is the terrorist.
وتصفية لكل متحرك. رصاص منهمر على عزل من السلاح. جاء القتلة يرتدون زيا عسكريا لأن الناس يشعرون
Other people
بالأمان
getting
مع الزي
inside to look
العسكري.
around. They are
لبسوا
under
ملابس
shock.
غيرهم ليستروا سوءة أفعالهم، وكان لهم السبق في الغدر وهم أهله. انتشر القتلة وبدأت المعركة غير المتكافئة وغير الشجاعة. بدأوا يجهضون حياة المرضى الذين لم يسلمهم المرض إلا إلى يد أولئك الذين لا يرحمون. هنا طبيبة من هول الفاجعة حاولت الهروب بحثا عن مخبأ من لصوص الأرواح، لكن لا مناص من القتل ولا أخلاق لمن يحملون الرصاص. لم يفرق القاتل بين رجل أو امرأة، فأجهض حياتها برصاصة في الرأس وألحق زميلتها بها بنفس الوحشية. لم يدرك القاتل أنه يفقد قيمه كلها عندما يوجه سلاحه نحو امرأة لا تملك إلا حلما بالنجاة.
Now those people are watching outside. A terrorist is coming from this door and throwing a hand grenade on them.
ببزته العسكرية فإذا به يتجه إليهم بوحشية قاتل متستر بثياب لا يساوي قيمتها، ويجيب استغاثتهم بقنبلة تودي بحياتهم. الموت هو كل بضاعة هؤلاء، وهم يمنحوه لمن يقابلهم رجلا أو امرأة أعزلا أو مسلحا.
I think we can stop here. which shows, unlike what few directors of hospitals told me when I interviewed them to the research that Miriam and I are doing, before seeing this movie, they told me, you know, we are not that concerned from the threat because we are treating them as well. We are treating terrorists. If they are coming, we treat them as any other patient. But as you can see, from a moral aspect, this is not a consideration which is being taken by the terrorists. And I would say, I could give you some other video clips that we have in Syria and other places in which hospitals have been attacked. But this is only the kinetic threat. This is the traditional, typical explosives attacks, assaults on hospitals, which is, I'm not trying to underestimate the threat, but you will hear today from our experts that there are other types of threats as well. Some of them are cyber. Some of them have this connection between cyber and kinetic threats. So the cyber threat, at the end of the day, leads to a very kinetic outcome. I think that altogether, we will have in the presentations today a better understanding of the magnitude and the nature of the threat to the health industry. With no further ado, I would like to start with the first speaker, who is actually my partner. And this is Miri Halperin Wernli, Dr. Miri Halperin Wernli. Miri is the Vice President, Deputy Head of Global Clinical Development, Head of Global Business and Science Affairs at Actelion, Pharmaceutical Headquarters in Switzerland. She is responsible for global life cycle management, global clinical project management, development finance management and control, and global clinical outsourcing. She has a vast experience in global drug development for over 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry and the biomedical and med device early technology research. Miri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. That's okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. And I think the topic of this morning that I'm going to cover is a little bit different from what you expect in this kind of setting, and it's mainly going to concentrate on the security of medical devices. And I will be speaking on behalf of myself, working with Boaz and with Professor Benoît Morel, who will also present on the same topic. And you'll see that there are some synergies and something that you will hear from both of us just to explain to you why this topic is important and relevant. So medical devices rely heavily on software. They use the software for computation, but also for connectivity and for communication. The devices and the networks that they are connected to are recognized as presenting now a potential risk of malfunction, which is induced either accidentally or deliberately by manipulation of and the contamination of the embedded software. We know that the devices and the systems are out there. We know that they keep people alive, but they clearly have vulnerabilities. And the device security has become essential. It's essential now to look at the security of these devices. I will just briefly give you, describe the security challenges of the devices. I will describe some initial solution, and then I will outline the prospective changes that we think the industry, the regulatory bodies, the legislators, and the medical community have to take in order to understand and mitigate these risks. Very quickly, there are a number of categories of medical devices, and I think that it's important to understand the difference of these categories. The first category we can identify is the peripheral medical devices. These are devices that need to connect to another computer, and they are based on traditional computer system. The scope is very large, and there are large amount of these devices in hospitals. There are specific issues with these devices is the vendors cannot 100% control the system, and the lifespan of these devices is usually longer than the computer. The advantages, of course, is that there are a lot of eyes looking at these devices, and a lot of issues can be discovered because many people are looking at them. And also there is a very solid process to apply patches and updates. This is the peripheral medical devices. The second category is the independent medical devices, which are embedded in our bodies. They have non-commercial operating system, and they run on proprietary codes. The specific issues with these devices is that they are hard-coded, and there is no independent testing. The power is limited, and there is limited access because they are directly connected to the human being. They are inside the body. The advantage is that the code base is a lot smaller, and also that these proprietary devices are much more equipped to support the lifespan of the device. The third category, which is network devices, is a hybrid device that utilize network or wireless for communication, and you can give instruction at a distance to interact with the device. The specific issue for this type of devices is that there are no updates. They are very slow to support new standards. There is no physical protection, and there is a lot of wireless option. Therefore, the surface for the attack is very large. One advantage there is a cost-saving advantage because there are no wires. It's much easy to install this. Instead of installing it in all the hospital buildings, you just use wireless. So the cost-saving aspect is very important here. If we now focus on the implantable medical devices, just zoom and what is called IMDs, it's implantable medical devices. You all know these devices. Pacemakers, ICDs, drug pumps, these are devices that are known to everybody. They are life-supporting, and most of these devices have wireless capabilities. You know some of them. They are the glucose sensors, pacemakers, but there are also emerging devices and very futuristic ones like the cyber-human interfaces. So there are new kind of these devices which will appear. These devices are certainly not new. They are over 50 years old, but they are changing, and the changes of these devices have implications for security and data privacy. And the risks are clearly related to the added internet connectivity and the wireless capabilities. Why are these devices' security so important? Because they have a direct impact on our health and on our lives. The physicians make life-threatening decisions based on the trust that they have in these devices, and the decisions depend on the data generated by the devices. The vital importance of these devices means that we must now look at the infrastructure of these devices in a very critical way. Most of them, they use computation software, not only in the design, but really in the actual operation. And without this software, most of these medical devices and medical treatments that they offer could not exist. So the software is a key element in these devices. Now the question is, what could possibly go wrong? What are the various risks of these implantable devices? How vulnerable they are, and what are the risks if somebody gains access to the devices? There are two categories of risks that we can identify. One is unintentional malfunction, and the second is intentional. The unintentional malfunction is linked to malware, to these viruses getting into the device old software. And you remember in July 2013, the FDA issued a warning to the device makers and to hospitals to close the security gaps, and the warning was focused on the risks of malware on hospital computers, also on smartphones and tablets. There is a second example. In 2010, there was a web security, the giant McAfee that we all know, paralyzed computers and hospitals because of a software update that went wrong. Another example, which I think is interesting, is linked to user interface, which shows the importance of timing. A physician discovered a bolus was given in 20 minutes instead of 20 hours. And you can imagine a patient getting the bolus in 20 minutes, what impact that can have. And that's a human error. And there is the famous example of the viruses getting on radiology equipment in the US and paralyzing hundreds of hospitals across the US. These are various examples of what can really happen. The risks that are linked to this malware, the biggest risk really is the wide-scale unavailability of patient care. Imagine you have a hospital and all of a sudden all of 1,000 infusions in the hospital will stop working. Imagine if something like this can happen. The second biggest risk is the integrity of medical sensor. And then again, imagine a scenario if a medical device begins to give incorrect data to the physician because the malware changed the interrupts, and the physician, of course, will make wrong clinical decisions with fatal outcome. This was the unintentional malfunction, but now we also start to worry about intentional malfunction. And these are malicious attacks which are intended to steal information and really cause harm. This is not a medical device, but it's an example of a malicious attack. You remember the intentional attack on Tylenol, the cyanide, Tylenol tainted with cyanide, and which led to the introduction of secured packaging. This was clearly a malicious attack. Another example, which I think is very interesting, is the hacking attack on the epilepsy patients in 2007. The hackers assaulted the epilepsy patients through the computer. They posted flashing animations on the website that induced migraines in the patients which were looking at the website. And this is really maybe the first case of the use of computer technology to actually maliciously cause the harm to patients. Can it happen with implantable medical devices? Consider what could happen if these devices are intended to reboot the heart. Instead of sending small shocks to regulate the heart, what they can do is really send a large shock which resyncs the heart. And they are programmable and they are connected. They monitor the heart constantly and they report back to healthcare physicians about the status of the patient. The patient is sent home with a device, and this allows the healthcare physician to monitor him directly from a distance, remotely. And there are multiple opportunities for malicious attacks on these devices. We identified 3 areas of vulnerabilities, and I'm just briefly sketch these areas. The first is what it can be called an insider attack. This is linked to a device programmer. All these devices have a programmer. If one of these programmers is stolen or goes missing, and somebody, a thief, takes it on, reverse engineers, and gets full access, this is a very big problem. And nobody knows today how many of these programmers are out there. There is no registry and no FDA oversight on this programmer. And at least now, at present, the manufacturer, the device manufacturer, at least in the US, are immune to lawsuits. Even if the devices are malfunctioning, there is no legislation that protects anybody, at least not yet. The second type of attack is an outside attack, not an inside attack anymore. And this is a passive outside attack, eavesdrop on patient information. There is a lot of private sensitive information on these devices, and these devices are not encrypted. The computer researchers, the friendly hackers, they managed to listen to the transmissions, and this allowed them to get the information on the patient, on the treating physician, on the diagnosis, on the hospital, really compromising patient privacy data. Another outside attack is the vital signs. It is possible to access all the vital signs through the device, and the vital signs, again, tell you a lot of private information on the patient. Another type of attack would be draining the energy. The implants are designed for infrequent use. They remain in sort of a sleeping low power mode, and they wake up to a higher mode only when there is a special event, if the heart is beating too slow or too quick. And the higher mode drains the battery. So imagine that somebody will wake up the device and will get it to stay in a high power mode. The device will be drained from energy from the battery in a matter of days. And then the only thing you need to do is to open the patient and take the device out. There is no other way of re-putting energy in this device. The other active outside attack that one could imagine is to turn off the therapy. In each device, there are a number of therapies settings which are available, and the physician really chooses on and off. He reprograms it, and the physician defines what is delivered. And imagine what would be possible using a recorded command. It's a direct way to command these machines. And finally, also linked to patient physiology, there is a way of affecting the patient physiology. You can wirelessly induce a fatal heart rhythm through the implantable device. You can induce what is called defibrillation, but at the same time, you can give the device the order to disable therapies. The result, of course, is fatal arrhythmia and the death of the patient. These are just examples of what attacks could happen, but I'm sure there are others. So where are we today? There are approval mechanisms in the US to approve these devices. I don't want to go into details here. I think it's not relevant. There are two mechanisms. One is called pre-marketing approval, and the second one, 510K, which is in the jargon of the industry, is very well known. My point here is that the FDA is looking only inside the scope. They look at how the devices normally act. Nobody is looking how the devices will act outside of its normal boundaries. And the same also for Europe. The process in Europe, the approval process is called CE marking, and again, there is no mention of security and no mention of communication in this approval process. The focus of the FDA and the EMA in Europe is medical safety. They are not experienced and they are not equipped to deal with security. Therefore, we think that the medical industry itself must take care of the medical device security. We cannot leave it in the hands of the regulators alone. The regulators are concerned. There were demonstrations from friendly hackers, and Benoît will talk about that have brought the risk of these various malfunctions to the attention of the regulators in the US. And the US Congress ordered an investigation. A special committee investigated for over a year, and the threat was so real that the FDA really had to take action. They told the manufacturers to tighten the security of these devices and to look for a better way to manage these risks. But in fact, if we want to increase the security of these devices, we have to make them available. We have to let the hackers, friendly hackers, hack these devices and have access to them. And these devices are medical devices that you cannot put your hands on them. So they are not available for research, and that's an important problem. The computer research have evaluated the vulnerability of these devices. They focused mainly on those who have embedded technologies, and there is growing concern over devices that use traditional and proprietary operating system and that connect to traditional networks. And indeed, there are major vulnerabilities that have been found that would allow the hackers to access many of these devices. There are different ideas, and I will just mention briefly how to protect these devices. These are really technical ideas. Just to give you an idea, there is possibility to add security service, one sort of a security service that will not take away the energy from the primary battery, because this is a key issue. It's called zero power technology. There are ideas to add patient notification. If somebody is disabling your therapist, you would like to know about it. So a system like a second module that will physically alert the patient. Another idea is to use a gatekeeper. Again, it's that will require a certain authentication against a gatekeeper. These are technical solutions that people are looking at. Also system to allow you to have a key that, and then you have a break glass emergency in case you need the key. But these solutions are, for the time being, in initial stages, and nothing has been really realized. It's very difficult to realize them technically. Is there a future role for the regulatory agency? There is a lot of pressure on the agency to address these issues, but like we said, they have no resources and they have no knowledge. The existing bodies are inexperienced and they don't know how to handle security research. And we are dealing with a growing market. The industry continues to grow, and the value is expected to hit 230 billion in 2015. So it's a very, very large industry, and as more and more devices are added, there will be more and more security issues. There will be more computerization. Clearly, there is further and further computerization in these devices. A larger communication, longer range communication, because people want to be able to have the freedom. There will be the internet, which can be used what we call bidirectionally, also to remote program, not only as read-only, which you can see the danger that that presents. And there will be cooperation among devices, even inside a body of one same person. They will be able to collaborate and cooperation with the devices. But this will obviously lead to additional security and privacy issues. So in summary, the risks today are related mainly to unintentional interference. The threats are accidents, metal detectors, and misidentification. And the metric that we have today is safety and effectiveness. The risks increase, obviously, with device complexity. The problem is that the future risks, we think, and that's what we like to raise awareness, will be related to intentional interference. The threats will be more from the wireless and the internet connectivity. The metric will be more security and privacy, and the risk will increase with the communication complexity, and there will be a lots of issues which will emerge as new devices are introduced. And we'll have to all look at new security measures which will have to be imagined and implemented. And here, links to our main topic of today, one of the biggest security concerns is that terrorists will use this security gap. And here I hand over to the terrorist expert, to Boaz, to talk about that.
Thank you, Miri. Actually, this is why I'm so intrigued to deal with the research of terrorism for so many years. And this is why conducting this type of research under the framework of the Interdisciplinary Center is so obvious. Because terrorism is an interdisciplinary phenomenon. And the fact that Miri and I can join forces and research together and bring to the table totally different tools, totally different perspective, and together create this whole, I think this is what is so unique in the field of counterterrorism research. So what I would like to do is actually to refer to that shift from unintentional threat to intentional threat. We just heard about the security gaps, about the lack of awareness of the public at large, and I would say even of the most of the people in the health industry, not everybody, but most of them. And I think we should put that in the framework and in the context of intentional, malicious use of terrorists. And we need to understand that the terrorists, as weird as it might sound to all of us, are in many cases innovative. We see them as primitive, we see them as barbaric, we see those horrific atrocities that they conduct in Iraq today, in Syria and other places altogether. But at the same time, some of the terrorists, especially in the higher echelons of the organization, are innovative. And there is all the time this competition of learning between terrorists and counter-terrorists. The counter-terrorists are trying to find new tactics, new modus operandis, new technologies that will give them better capabilities in countering the threat of terrorism. The terrorists are trying to look for the new soft bellies, new tactics, and new technologies that they can misuse in order to conduct further attacks. I think that what Miri just showed us is a grave, unfortunately, opportunity for terrorist organization and for terrorists altogether. The terrorists are, it's not a good sound. The terrorists are trying to allocate new knowledge, new scientific knowledge, new scientific capabilities. We just learned last week that ISIS in Iraq is looking for scientists. This primitive barbaric organization is looking for scientists. For what? In order to go ahead, in order to think, in order to develop, in order to plan the new tactics, the new modus operandis, and so on and so forth. Anybody who is reading the 9/11 Commission, this important book that analyzed 9/11, can see that those analysts refer to 9/11 as the leg of imagination from the point of view of the American security services, not lack of imagination from the point of view of the terrorists. They conducted the most horrific terrorist attack ever with a very primitive tool, with knives. So we need to be more imaginative. We need to open up. We need to think ahead. We need to try to understand how our day-to-day activity, how our science, how our modern tools might be misused by terrorists. We should bear in mind that there is also a change of generations. My generation, which used to be the generation of the heads of the terrorist organization, is becoming older. And right now, the higher echelons of terrorist organizations, the commandship of terrorist organizations, are younger people. And they will be younger as time will pass. And younger people are more friendly, more knowledgeable with computers, with the cyberspace, with the internet. This is why maybe we saw our generation more reluctant to use cyber terrorism, but the new generation might be more friendly and ready to use that. The new generation, in many cases, of those terrorists is being educated in the Western society and has the ability to acquire the knowledge, acquire the tools which are needed to conduct the attack. So to put that threat in the framework of the strategy of terrorism, let me go back and speak a little bit about the nature of modern terrorism strategy versus classical terrorism, and then try to see where the threat of this malicious use of medical implants fits into this strategy. So modern terrorism strategy, it's an indirect strategy. The terrorists are interested in conducting random killing. They don't really care what is the identity of the victim. They don't care if it's me or you or anybody else. Sometimes they do care about the group identity. They want to kill Israelis. settlers. They want to kill Jews. They want to kill Christians. They want to kill infidels. But they don't really care who is the personal identity of, what is the personal identity of the victim itself. Modern terrorism is an indirect strategy in which the goal of the terrorist is to create fear and anxiety and then translate this fear and anxiety into a change of reality by changing the way people think, by inducing anxiety, by forcing them to change their behavior as an outcome of that. The classical terrorism used to be an individual terrorism. It still is, but it's less common today. When I talk about individual terrorism, I talk about political assassinations. It started maybe in ancient history. And here the identity of the victim is very important. The terrorist would like to kill certain person, a specific person. Here it's not an indirect strategy anymore, it's a direct strategy because they want to kill this person because they believe that if this person will die, it will change the reality by the very act itself. So when we are talking about the threats of malicious use of medical implants, we are going back in the history of terrorism into the classical time. Because as we can understand, this, at least as I understand, this tactic is not aimed to cause mass killing. It's not like suicide attacks, 9/11 types of attacks, and so on and so forth. It's designated to assassinate a certain person or a person who belongs to a group of people, and by that to send an indirect message as well. So it's attacking an individual target, a family member, a close person to that. It could be, when we talk about the tactics of classical terrorism, we talk about either killing, kidnapping, or using other types of activity. How those goals are being achieved? By different tactics. By using explosive device, shooting, cold weapon, poisoning, sabotage. But here we add the option, which was not known in the counterterrorism experts' cycles. Also the disruption of medical treatment. And the disruption for this medical treatment practically could be in two ways. It could be physical disruption, and it could be cyber, indirect and not direct attack, which is aimed to disrupt the medical treatment altogether. We saw, even in recent history, cases in which terrorists wanted to assassinate a leader. Even in Israel, we had this assassination of late Rabin. You can mention so many in the last few decades. Another example would be Hans Martin Schleyer was killed in Germany by the Red faction, the Red Army faction. And he was kidnapped and then killed. So when we talk about the physical direct attack, which is aimed to disrupt the medical treatment, it could be by invasive activity, by actually trying to stop the medical treatment which is being conducted, or to deceive the physicians by inducing maliciously, intentionally, lethal, counterfeited medicines. But it also could be by sabotaging medical equipment, physically or via cyber, or as Miri was pointing out, also interfere with the function of medical implants altogether. So to sum this up, what Miri and I are trying to explain, to argue, is that we need to raise the security awareness, or the awareness of the security personnel to these specific threats. We are very concerned with the option that terrorists will take advantage of this security gap and will maliciously exploit this option in order to kill and to harm specific figures in the near future, not necessarily in the long run. Another complementary perspective to what Miriam and I have just pointed out will be given by the next speaker. And the next speaker is Professor Benoît Morel. He will speak about intersections between terrorism and the world of medical devices. Professor Morel is an Emeritus Professor of Engineering and Public Policy and Physics at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His research interest in international security began as a science fellow at what was then the Center of International Security and Arms Control, CSAC, at Stanford. His research is cybersecurity focuses on the international dimension of developing nation, anomaly-based detection, and cybersecurity of medical devices. Professor Morel.
This one? No, that's not that. Mine is, I'll tell you, mine is Morel Cyber.
This one? More? Okay.
No, not this.
I got it.
Yes, that's right. Okay, well, thank you very much for this. So tell me, if I want to move things around, I use this or I use...
Whatever you want.
Okay, great. So it works. Yeah,
Speak to the mic.
yeah, I'll speak to the microphone. So I don't know because people may hear me if I speak to the microphone. In any case, so hope you don't mind too much to hear me. So I speak fast and with a French accent. I'm aware of that. I'm a Frenchman I've been a professor in Carnegie Mellon now for quite some time. And represent here a bit of this mix of a culture of security and cyber, which is a specialty of Carnegie Mellon. And recently got involved a bit with medical devices. But teaching about terrorism and looking at what happened in the United States made me always start with this kind of saying of Benjamin Franklin, to remember when we are in counter-terrorism, remember the terrorists exploit the fact that our society is open and free. And if we begin to play game with that, we, in fact, compromise with the terrorists. We should, whatever solution we find in counter-terrorism should keep this our freedom and and openness as absolutely granted. So as I say, those who are willing to give up some liberty for more security deserve neither liberty nor security. It doesn't apply as much to Israel, but applies, unfortunately, a little bit to the United States, you see. This is the culture of DHS. In any case, having said that, the cyber, I will, since I come after Miriam and Boaz, and if they said a lot of what I wanted to cover, so I will take some freedom with respect to what you see here and instead emphasize some points, you see. For medical devices in the context of cybersecurity, it's a very newcomer phenomenon, and then you will see it amplifies a bit the problems. Secondly, there is, we know it's a context of cybersecurity and terrorism means cyber-terrorism. A compatriot of mine, born French, yesterday said there is no such a thing as cyber-terrorism. I strongly disagree with that. It's not because there's never been a cyber-terrorist attack that there will not be any. It happens, it is possible to potentially generate terror through cyber means, but has never happened. So I would be one of those who say there is not happened really, but it may happen. And medical devices and health could be a point of entry like that. Secondly, terrorists have not yet the record to be very high-tech, but it's maybe a matter of time. But I tend to agree with what Boaz just said. It should give them some time. There is an aspiration. Sometimes some terrorists, or head of a terrorist organization, suggest that they would like to attack this and that in general. So now taking the case of medical devices, a case study of that phenomenon, I'd like to point to the fact that we have here generating a vulnerability which is not This is not uncommon in the field, by the way. Whenever we modernize the power grid, whenever we modernize airplanes and put computers and communications everywhere, whenever we modernize cars, we expose our society to more cyber attacks of all kinds, could take a cyber terrorist form, you see. So there is a question we have to understand. We're in a phase now where definitely we are exposing ourselves more and more. Now, what about these medical devices? What is happening? For example, let's take an example, intensive care units. Intensive care units today are technically far more secure and efficient than they were in the past. You see, when you're in intensive care units, there's a few vital signs which are collected by sensors and shown in computers, and not so long ago, before the invention of YCT becomes more prevalent, there's a lady or guys who come every 3 or 5 minutes to check a little bit. Yes. No, I don't need to breathe. In other words, you want me to speak less fast. See, there's two problems if I speak less fast. One is it will take longer, and the second is you may understand what I say. Having said that, then, in the intensive care units, well, I'll try my best, you see. Today, you see, thanks to the introduction of computers and communication systems, you do not need all this personnel. Technically, in modern hospitals in the United States and elsewhere, you have a control room, kind of control room somewhere, with a few computers, each or several computers, and somebody there monitoring the information collected from all these guys on their bed, guys or ladies in their beds. And they don't even need to be very concentrated, because even if something goes wrong, automatically there'll be a flag, a noise of some sort, and that person will know. And what we'll do is either can take a measure immediately, or connect with the attending a physician, whoever is in charge of that person, who could be anywhere in the world at that time. Like, for example, in Hawaii, we like to be very often, these people, and then communicate with them and say, look, we have this problem. The guy can log in, get all the data now. It's much better than simply being told these things doesn't go well. He has all the data on the patient and can give much more informed instructions to the people at that moment. So in fact, curiously, you have created conditions for an improved quality of the treatment, and on top of that, facilitate the life of the physician, not tied and can move around, you see. Unambiguously, this is an advantage. But you need to log in. How do you prevent a kind of hackers to instead immerse itself in this kind of communication and come himself and interfere with that? Like, for example, he has his mother-in-law in the intensive care unit, and we take advantage of that to kind of send some information that contribute to kill her. But the system used today is a password system. But you see, I won't elaborate too much, but this is a graph which Mudge, which a very well-known hacker, likes to show how easy to crack passwords, any password. This is based on a computation, on the kind of a competition they gave in one of those hackers' conference. They gave 50,000 passwords to people to crack, and those who won cracked 33,000 of them in matter of 38,000 of them in matter of 48 hours. And you can see also the speed at which it went is also generate some structures. When you try to understand how password crackers work, you can see this based on different patterns. You detect some patterns. Absolutely, you can discover a lot of passwords and so on and so forth. But the truth of the matter is there is no such a thing as a password which is a safe password. Well, some of them are more difficult to crack than others, but if you knew the number of software cracked passwords, you would say the password as a protection against serious hackers is no protection. I'm paid to teach that sort of things. Now, let's move into the world of medical devices. Medical devices today, there are more and more of them. Mary did a very, very good job in describing this new world, which is fast-moving. And now the new ones are inside your body. The only way you don't need to kind of physically reach them. There is a system of communication, wireless communication with them, to reprogram them, to do all sorts of things with them, which is a very good evolution. You know, potentially, they are being connected to the internet. So now you need to be within a few meters of them in order to have an effect, more or less the range of a Bluetooth. But in the future, you can do that from Novosibirsk. If you wanted. So therefore, that means potentially those things which are inside your body are connected to all over the place, you see. which in of itself is again has some advantages, considering your physician could be anywhere in the world and could reprogram your machine wherever he can. But the problem is that some hackers, what hackers are not necessarily what people think, are not criminals necessarily. This guy, Barnaby Jack, is a typical hacker who loves breaking things. And so the hackers are like that. The guys, instead of having girlfriends when they're young, they prefer to spend their evening breaking complicated systems and call for free, or break computers, or this kind of everything. There's something complicated being created, they try to break it. But now when they succeed, they like to go to conferences like Black Hat or that to brag and show, look, I've found a way to break that system. And the other hackers are there applauding. But it happens for those of you who are interested in cybersecurity, the hackers are the key. They are the ones who are driving the cybersecurity things. They are developing the exploits. They are developing the tools, which now we call security tools. You subtract the hackers from the equation, not much is left. And that's a challenge for scholars like me, because you go to a hacker kind of meeting. A hacker meeting is not a place like scholar meeting when people speak one after time. And so there's a place with banters, beer, and this kind of thing. And you see all these demonstrations being made. Now, Barnaby Jack is an interesting character. 2 years ago, he made a demonstration ATM machine. He reversed engineered ATM machines, and he showed it was possible to make them do whatever you want. And he was from there. It took him several weeks or months to do that, but he was there on the thing, showing exactly where the ATM machines in Las Vegas are. And he had one next to him. He managed to have him spurt all his content of his money in front of everybody. So he could remotely do that for other ATM machines, potentially. So it would be nice for somebody passing in the street and suddenly see all this money passing by. But then a year after, he decided to go for defibrillators, medical devices. And it turns out it's not so easy to reverse engineer, and it is illegal, in fact, but doesn't stop them. The legality for hackers is not the name of the game. He reverse engineered one, and he gave a conference in Australia, in a semi-minor, it's not that minor, but nevertheless not a major conference for hackers, and he made a demonstration, and he said, look, I can, if needed, if I wanted, I could remotely give a little jolt to somebody who has this kind of defibrillators. And he was planning to do exactly this conference in Las Vegas, in the Black Hat meeting, which was this conference supposed to start July 27, 2013. And so mysteriously, he died 2 days before. And people were highly expecting this conference, and nevertheless asked the questions whether there was anything a bit dubious about the circumstances of that. But he died probably of a dose of some sort. There is no question that Medtronic, who was the maker of that, was not exactly enjoying the whole thing, you see. And in fact, it is technically illegal to do, but they don't know exactly how to sue people who point to the fact that there is this vulnerability in their system which they did not know. And in fact, what happened, if you reverse engineer, so to speak, what he did, it took him weeks, if not months, to reverse engineer the device. And as soon as he understood how it worked, he had no problem to say, I can program it to kill somebody. So therefore, it's not as if that part was difficult to do. Now, is it difficult to avoid that? It's a different story, because you like the functionality, but not necessarily the way it is displayed there. So from a technical point of view, he raised a serious issue. He's not the only one. At the same meeting, this guy, Jay Ratliff, with whom I've been correspondence, because unfortunately, Barnaby Jack, there's a problem, he's himself a diabetic. He has an insulin pump, which is also, in fact, made by Medtronic, but don't believe Medtronic is the only one like that, which discovered he could himself remotely give himself and anybody who had the same pump a kind of overdose insulin, if needed. Again, a lethal thing. So he could remotely kill somebody with that. And what Barnaby Jack mentioned is the fact that considering that all the defibrillators at this moment are difficult to distinguish from each other. If you had enough people when you are suppose in a subway or in a carriage like that, and he could kill everybody with a defibrillator around. And now it's potentially, if you can do that through the internet, you can kill a lot of people around. So obviously, the day people want to intentionally, maliciously try to kill people, you can really do a lot of damage and make people. But that's a form of terrorism at large scale, with high tech, at large scale. Now, there is answers to that, technical answers, is that these devices could be made a bit more individualized. Today, they are not. it is clear that when you discuss with the people in those fields, that they have not anticipated these kind of problems. I will elaborate a little bit on that if time I don't know. Be it known that FDA being confronted, exposed only to this evidence that the system they certified, in fact, can be used lethally against people, realize that something has to be added to their system of certification, which is very well described, by the way, by Miriam. So far, it's an in-scope, now it goes out of the box kind of situation, and they made a kind of outreach to the hackers and asked them to disclose whatever thing, the new vulnerability they could find in devices. The post or pre-market, by the way, because they are not very dogmatic about that. Admittedly, it's better if it's done pre-market, because if there is a vulnerability discovered post-market, could lead to a recall. And a recall of things when people have that inside their body is a bit messy. So it would be nicer if it took place before. There is not yet a kind of good methodology to do that. And there is no replacement for hackers. Let's face it, with all their faults, the hackers are the best. But they are not exactly the same as risk analysts and things like that. In any case, hackers will be reluctant because there are laws against reverse engineering things. And you can't imagine the vendors try to volunteer to give them their devices for analysis. So we are in a situation now, then we are a dangerous situation. And I know firsthand that the FDA is concerned, doesn't exactly know how to go to the next step. And in fact, potentially, we are creating there a real exposure to serious problem. So just to say that in case you think it's just a matter of technology, no, there is laws, there are interests there. The vendors are not against the notion. They prefer to produce something which is safe and something which is not. But now if you ask them to add to the cost massively and to change their culture because of that, you have a problem nevertheless. Now, the problem is also, maybe I will skip that, this notion that these medical devices are high-tech. They are high-tech up to a point. But I come from a university where for us high-tech is something which is based on the latest cutting-edge technology. Medical devices are not. Medical devices, in fact, Mary also mentioned that, have a life cycle of 15 years or something like that. Often, the software which is underlying all that, a software which is the equivalent of, it's not only the equivalent, it's what they use, Windows XP. They're not even they do not know how to update to the other kind of software. So Windows XP, with all the vulnerabilities, not even supported as we speak by Microsoft, is technically the technology which is used in those things. All of them. It's not Medtronic only now. It's Boston Scientific and all that. And explain to me, because I inquired a little bit, because you build a platform and you add functionalities on the platform. But you see, the fact is the whole architecture, the whole logic of the system is such that it's not conducive to kind of have this kind of wide, high-tech kind of things. There's new functionalities added on something which is very old. And on top of that, that is something which I skipped a bit when I was mentioning Jay Ratcliffe. But if you look at Jay Ratcliffe, the people listening to that, so when Jay himself began to interact with the system, it may reveal that the vendors do not want people to update, to modify. Even if there is an improvement, an update somewhere, a patch which is offered for softwares or for whatever vulnerabilities found, they say you do better do not implement this patch, otherwise we will not guarantee our system. Because part of it is because in those companies, this culture of cyber culture is not as advanced as people think. It takes longer than people imagine for this cyber culture to permeate everywhere. That's part of the challenge. At the moment, the high technology is everywhere, that in fact those who do devices, whatever they are, medical or otherwise, are not necessarily cutting edge on that, considering that it's difficult enough for them to already develop all the functionalities going with that. And so that is part of the complexity of the situation, that we are creating conditions of complexity of exploitable situation that very knowledgeable kind of hackers could exploit, and therefore, if they work for terrorist organization would be able to exploit. But we do not understand fully. It's already the case elsewhere. That kind of cyber criminality exists around banks, around things like that. You see, they develop malware which outsmart us. Outsmart the guys, the victims at first before people catch up, you see. But they're ahead of the curve. Where are they educated? Probably in MIT and Carnegie Mellon, by the way. So we educate them. But the result is that they are good at that, they are cutting edge, and these guys, these vendors, are far away from being cutting edge and much behind the students, far behind. And it is the guys, nevertheless, who develop these medical devices on a worldwide basis. So we can, it is not, it really is it's a complication. Alors, countermeasures in these things, having a strategy is not so easy because there is really a technical dimension which is difficult to appreciate fully. And there is also a legal context which is difficult also to modify and to manipulate. And there is commercial interests which are there. And then we're backing into that situation. So that makes that, even if we understand the problem intellectually completely, we have to be prepared to have to go through a kind of complicated transition before we even have a proper kind of counter, proper posture with respect to that. No. Now, the problem is, if I may look at my kind of tendency to be a bit, not anarchist, but no less, of all that, look at the governments and regulators. So it is clear that FDA, for example, are extremely responsible. What they want is to find a methodology where confidently they can say, we are accomplishing our responsibility, social responsibility, to certify drugs and medical devices in ways which make sense. In the case of the medical devices, they know, we all know, that it means a change of methodology. Whereas in drugs, which I'm not super expert, I know that they insist on some kind of openness in a way, transparency in the way the drugs operates and is made and so on and so forth. And potentially we'd like the same about medical devices. They did not have. Medical devices are very proprietary kind of things, and this openness could really affect a little bit, more than a little bit, could affect, in fact, the ability of the companies to maintain the monopoly of this technology. So they don't want to open that. There is, at this level, there obviously something will have to take place, which I don't know what form it will take, but is of a deeper nature. And now, I spoke medical devices, but medical devices is only one example of many examples. So you have all this embedded system. Our societies now is potentially exposing itself to all sorts of cyber attack. And the cyber attack could have a huge intersection with terrorism, there's no question. So the day cyber terrorists begin to be really cyber, and that will be the day. The number of points of entry they have, this is only one new one, which is appearing, which is growing. It's only one new one. So as mentioned here, the fact that cars, for example, cars are bound to be a good target. See, cars have you have much more computer power in cars now than there ever been in, especially in Apollo 11, but anywhere. And these computers in cars are progressively connected to the internet. It's already the case in General Motors. It's the case in Audi and the most advanced cars, but it is will potentially all the new cars will be. And when they're connected to the internet, it's not only for infotainment, as you call it, but it's also to control arrival of gas and the throttle of the car or the brakes themselves. So now if some of the cars you General Motors sell today, if somebody steals your car, you can remotely block the arrival of gas. So therefore, the guy cannot go very far with your car. But you see, a hacker can do that to you as well. A hacker could also potentially make sure that your brake doesn't stop anymore. And now, if you make that at the level of a large enough kind of size, it could become a serious terrorist potential there. And then the smartphone becomes a very good system for that, because you can do that with a smartphone. You don't even need to be on a computer. So we have a new world now with the potentials and abilities for terrorists to make their way to do a lot of damage with a limited means becomes unlimited. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoît. Well, I think we are all more educated now about the threat of terrorist infiltration into the medical devices, medical implants. And we are leaving this subject now and moving on to a different subject, which has to do with the health industry, and I refer to the pharmaceutical crime. We are privileged to have Miki Arieli with us, who will speak about the new dangerous trends in pharmaceutical crime. Miki is the director of the Israeli Ministry of Health Division of Enforcement and Inspection. In 2013, Under his leadership, the division was awarded a Certificate of Excellence by Minister of Health for its work in pharmaceutical crime. His tenure with the Ministry of Health included serving as director of the Pharmaceutical Crime Unit from 2007 up to 2012. Nikki, the floor is yours.
First of all, I want to thank Boaz, and I'm thankful that ICT and Miriam, that at least they have the open ear to understand a problem that we knew it was very hard to explain the problem of pharmaceutical crime or crime and terrorism, crime and organized crime to the health industry, to the health ministry. They thought we're crazy. So I'm very happy, and I thank you very, very much. I'd like to talk about what's going on right now. I was in, excuse me, I'm a little hyperactive, so I need it. I'd like to talk about some new, I just came back, I was in Vienna in April this year in regards to an international, we have an international meeting called WEGIO, in which all the European nations of pharmaceutical crime, together with Interpol and Europol, meet together to discuss the problems. Europe today, in regards to pharmaceutical crime, is in total chaos. They're in total fear. And I'll explain to you what's going on and why that's really important. Forget about, we have a lot of international cooperation in regards to major enforcement units throughout Europe and the United States. Internally, quite obviously, we deal with the Ministry of Finance Enforcement. I have from Customs, who is our major partner, and Police, Ministry of Defense, and the Prime Minister's Office. One of the new projects we're going to be beginning is cybercrime. The major way of marketing counterfeit drugs, stolen drugs, and also instrumentation, as we deal with, is through the cyber. Facebook, how do you close it down? The new legal highs, like Spice or Nice Guy, how do you close it? It's being sold through Facebook. So one of the things we're going to be doing is something like that. Pharmaceutical crime deals with so many different things, and I'll just go through a couple of them, but the counterfeit drugs, we deal not only with in regards to IP involvement, okay, but we deal with anything. For example, if you have vitamin C, we go according to the WHO definition of counterfeit, and that basically states false representation. If I have vitamin C, and I say it's vitamin C, but it's great for an impotent person, and it really it contains twice the amount of Viagra that something else does, from our aspect, that's counterfeit. If I have a drug which was supposed to be, because it's outdated, that was supposed to be sent to Ramat Chovav, to our place where we destroy bad drugs, and I repackage it and send it to pharmacies, even though it's the real drug, it's counterfeit from our aspect. We deal with other things such as precursors, designer drugs, steroids, and, of course, medical devices. We, so far, have seen, just as a side effect, basically, we have one person who's right now on reserve duty, was in Gaza for the last month, but he deals with the whole aspect of the criminality aspects of medical devices. Right now, we've only seen low-level, not high-level things. We've seen, for example, what we believe to be counterfeit insulin needles. 2 million counterfeit insulin needles infiltrated the UK market a couple years ago, and they were non-sterilized, or at least believed non-sterilized, okay? So things like that can happen. Just as a side thing on that, I was involved in a project that was financed by the EU, in which we were looking into doing a dental implant with a nanopump for methadone. Because usually narcotic addicts who are on methadone, they're not very compliant. Actually, it was very effective. I thought it was effective and very nice, but Telefonka, I think it's Telefonka, the Spanish telecommunications, wanted to actually come in and work on a project where the doctor could be distant away, work on the cell phone with the nanopump, get the level of methadone, or we're looking at insulin also, and then change it through the cell phone. So everything you're talking about, both of you, was you see now how relevant it was. Okay. Let's take an example of a counterfeit drugs in Israel today, just to give you an example. Xenical, manufactured by Roche. It contains a drug which is not systemically absorbed. It was given by a pharmacy in Netanya, and it contained an amphetamine-type drug where a lady had a cardiovascular incident, sibutramine, and she was then hospitalized. But on the same hand, we went to a sex store in Kfar Saba, not too far, and we found something called General Rail. Had no idea what it is. We opened it up, and my God, the same blue capsule saying Xenical on it, but it contained Viagra. On the other hand, and I have part of my division here, and I'm very happy, Dr. Wani Berkovich was at the Allenby Bridge and intercepted 20,000 blue Xenical capsules, which contains glucose. So meaning the same capsule had 3 different materials in it. That's one of the dangers of counterfeit drugs. And I suppose the same counterfeiter in China had an abundance of Xenical capsules and just used them as a way of supplying. But that's the dangers of it. The problem with it is, if you look at this map right here, you'll see as long as the distribution chain is long, you can counterfeit paperwork. Because the moment you counterfeit paperwork, you lose transparency and you have no idea where a product is coming from. And raw material suppliers, 90% is, something like 90% is from China. Until it arrives to the pharmacy and to the patient, it's a long, long way, and many things can happen. Here, the distributor or wholesalers is one of the major problems, both in Europe, the United States, and in Israel. Because the moment counterfeit drugs are put into the distributors, you lose all transparency. In Israel, we have a problem, okay? For example, the law states that any wholesaler can transfer drugs to any other wholesaler. Well, that's fine. But by the time it gets to the pharmacy, we have no idea where it was beforehand. And we have found stolen materials and counterfeit, which were then distributed to pharmacies, which were laundered within legitimate distributors. You're going to have an exam on this graph right now. But a couple of the ways in which counterfeit or bad products infiltrate the supply line. One of the ways is, for example, products which were supposed to be destroyed, as I just said, were not destroyed. They were then repackaged, sent back to wholesalers. They counterfeited or fabricated the paperwork, and then later sold to pharmacies. Quite obviously, the internet is one of the major areas, and as I said, the wholesalers is another. Pharmaceutical crime and terror. In Europe, 70% of the counterfeit drugs are infiltrated through the free port zones in the Gulf. Customs and anybody else just doesn't get in there. They can't check them. And it's a major problem. We talked to the Spanish people, the Spanish authorities, a couple months ago, and they opened up a free port in Tangier, which is very close to Spain and to Europe. Is there going to be inspection and so on? They were also concerned. Basically what this says, and this Marco Musemi, actually we met him from UNICRI, from the United Nations. Basically we're talking about anything regarding counterfeit drugs or pharmaceutical crime is a transnational problem. And right now we're starting to see more and more, and specifically in Europe, organized crime involved with it. And we'll also see how exactly that terrorist groups work on the same basis as organized crime and sometimes join in with them in order to finance their activities. And what he stated, and I think it really is important, and we found this, we had a meeting a couple of days ago with one of the national police units, and we were talking about counterfeit drugs. And the modus operandi is very, very similar to drug smuggling, to arms smuggling, and anything else. So keep that in mind. The Stimson Center came out with the whole idea of there's a widening involvement of organized transnational criminal organizations which are involved with this, but also, as we stated, terrorist groups. And we know about narco-terrorism. We know how Hezbollah, for example, is very involved in regards to drug trafficking. And consequently, they not only sometimes work alone, but they are in joint with some of the major organized crime areas. As an example, this was given to us by AstraZeneca, one of the major drug companies. And you'll see here, for example, this is from a drug wholesaler in Barcelona. And the drugs were sent to Lebanon, All Pharma. All Pharma is related, it's a wholesaler in Beirut whose family is related to Hezbollah, major Hezbollah figures, okay? So consequently, they were involved with laundering both drugs, counterfeit drugs, and the money laundering. So these are some of the things in which Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. I was a young pharmacist, not that young, but in the 90s, working in a private pharmacy, and we found a counterfeit ampicillin, Moxipen Forte from Teva, and it was behind that was the PRO, okay? And as you see, all the major terrorist organizations were involved in something regarding counterfeit. I want to explain that from an economic aspect, pharmaceutical crime pays. It's bigger, it's big money with very minimal crime, with very minimal punishment. So anything in regards to devices or in regards to pharmaceuticals, it definitely pays. And our fear is in Israel, we're going to start seeing more and more of organized crime and terror groups being involved with this. This is Syria 2008, before Mr. Assad had his problems. And the major area of counterfeiting. But interestingly enough, some of those drugs later penetrated, I guess, over the Allenby Bridge. And they found over $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, of counterfeit drugs in Nablus, in Shechem, and also near Jerusalem. The reason the Palestinian Authority got involved with it is that they were using these were all life-saving drugs, not just Viagra, which could be life-saving also. But nonetheless, I'm talking about blood pressure drugs, I'm talking about cancer, oncology drugs, I'm talking about anything conceivable, and they penetrated the Palestinian Authority market. Understanding that anything that penetrates the Palestinian Authority market eventually penetrates our market. So they made this catch, and they also apprehended one of the people behind it who was a Hamas affiliate. So consequently, again, the connection. Just in general, I'm going to give you a general thing. We've gone through this before. In regards to pharmaceutical crime and funding, in the United States, they caught 19 people involved with Hezbollah, who were also dealing with the counterfeit Viagra. This is some of the things we did projects on also. This All Pharma appears all the time. Hezbollah in regards 2008, 2010. Plavix is a life-saving drug. It dilutes blood. It dilutes the blood after a stroke or after a cardiovascular attack. Counterfeit. It also penetrated the European market, okay? We made a test buy in the Palestinian Authority. We tested it. There was 0% active ingredient. Someone after a heart attack gets nothing. And that's to me is homicide. But anyhow, involved with this also was a person that we know, Mr. Fenish, whose brother, if I'm not mistaken, is a...
Mr. Fenish sounds like a Western.
What am I going to do with my American accent? But anyhow, quite obviously involved with the Hezbollah. In 2012, there was also a big case of over 100 types of counterfeit drugs were imported to Lebanon. Again, Mr. Venice was involved, and also Mr. Wahhabi. And Mr. Wahhabi, who was also, we believe, linked, had a pharmaceutical wholesaler in Belgium, and he was involved with the major cases in 2007, 2008 of counterfeit drugs, many counterfeit drugs infiltrating the European market. He later fled. Of course, we have the case which Boaz and Miriam are the experts on. That's Captagon. Captagon was a drug used for ADD, ADHD. It was taken off the market. It's still being counterfeited in Lebanon, in Nabaka, in Beirut. It contains amphetamine. It's the #1 drug of abuse in the Arab world. We have customs has made, at least with the police, they found at least within the last couple of years, 9 catches going over the border, going into Israel. We believe that even some of it is in East Jerusalem. Tramadol is a non-narcotic drug. It's used for pain. We caught thousands of them. It's the major drug of abuse in Gaza, according to the literature. And we found thousands of them near the seashore north of Netanya. We believe it was somehow or so fell off the boat. We're not sure exactly what happened to it, but we believe it was on its way to Gaza. This was a case in which I was involved with my unit. It was an anabolic steroid case in which Israelis working together with organized crime in the United States we worked with the DEA, controlled the 2 of the 4 steroid labs in the United States. And with that, they later found, the DEA later found a connection with an Iranian terrorist group involved with these people. And this was the case, our last case. This nice man on the right, that's his father on his left, are the major suppliers of precursors to manufacture amphetamine and methamphetamine. Drugs against sinuses, which I use myself, can be used to manufacture amphetamine and methamphetamine. There was a request for 10 million tablets from an Israeli company who worked with us to an African nation. The African nation, considering we didn't think there was that much sinus problems in that particular country, we notified the DEA. And in the end, it turned out this wonderful man here is connected to the Mexican cartels, who's also connected, a man in between all this thing was a Lebanese, who we believe was Hezbollah connected, and there was an Israeli. And in the end, all 10 million tablets were supplied to the Democratic Republic of the Congo under surveillance of the DEA, and they were believed to be, no one came to get it, okay, in the end, but they were destroyed. So again, you have the connection of the Mexican cartels, a nice Lebanese citizen, and also this guy here has offices in Dubai. Very interesting connection. So you're finding this all the time, and like I said, big money. Okay, now we get back to what I really want to get involved with. First of all, around 2012, 2013, Avastin, a major drug, oncology drug, penetrated the American market coming from Turkey. Going through, as we see again, the supply line is very long. It's going through a bunch of countries until it arrived in the United States. 19 clinics in the United States received counterfeit Avastin that there was no active ingredient in it. And who was involved? Again, in Turkey, an organized crime ring. Now, the way they worked it was repackaging expired drugs again and reselling them. There was also counterfeit versions. So it was repackaging bad drugs, expired drugs, and also counterfeiting, tampering and counterfeiting. Remember that, because why? We're going to look now. When I was in Vienna, they started off with a Remicade case. Remicade is a very, very expensive and important drug used in Crohn's, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. $8 billion in worldwide sales. It's worth doing. We're not talking about lifestyle. We're talking about life-saving. And then we found in 2013, there was an infiltration of suspected counterfeit products to the EU market. Now, the MHRA, the equivalent unit of ours in the UK, did an investigation. What did they find? Remember the supply line. A German wholesaler, legal wholesaler, found that there was a bad drug in Germany. Now, he bought this drug from a legal wholesaler in the UK, who had bought it from another legal wholesaler in the UK, who bought it also from another legal wholesaler in the UK, who bought it from a Romanian agent who was involved with a wholesaler in Romania. Now, the moment you have that long supply line, you lose there's no transparency. You have no idea where something is coming from. Now, the MHRA began an investigation, and what's important to us is that the vials were consistent with authentic Remicade distributed in Turkey, quality of the product is likely to have been compromised, but most importantly, handled and transported outside the legitimate supply chain. What's important to us here is, in June 2013, the Romanian authorities related that the wholesaler in Romania is linked to organized crime and a terror group. When I requested from them, from the MHRA, who was the terror group. It's not politically correct to talk about it, okay? They were very, but anyhow, we're seeing the direct link now between organized crime and terror and counterfeit life-saving drugs which infiltrated the European market. The big case right now, and this is why Europe is in total chaos, is the Herceptin case. The Herceptin case is used, Herceptin is a major drug, oncology drug for breast cancer. Many bottles of that, ampoules of that, have infiltrated the European market in many countries. But what's interesting is, now Domenico is a friend of mine. He's the head of the anti-counterfeit in Italy. And basically he's talking about when he stated that a criminal ring, the criminal ring is the Italian Camorra, who was also related to Eastern European organized crime groups, and Russian citizens based in Cyprus. They just, in April when we received the report, it was just the beginning of what was total chaos. They found out later that basically it started off with stolen medications, medications that were transferred by trucks, were hijacked, hospitals were broken into, and also unused ampoules or vials, which were not destroyed, were then taken. They were then relabeled and later counterfeited. So we had cases again of tampering and counterfeiting and stolen merchandise. They later found that the Herceptin had low-cost antibiotics in it. A poor person who has breast cancer basically did not receive her treatment. What we found out now is that this has been going on at least for 3 years. At that time in April, they were talking about 30 medications they believed would infiltrate the European market. I want to say almost every week we receive alert from the Europeans and from our other organizations regarding other life-saving counterfeit drugs which have penetrated the European market. As you see here, this is one of the ampules. You can see the cover of it was tampered. It doesn't fit quite right. And this is what patients received. What's interesting, okay, the supply models were, and this is important, a bogus operator would sell to an Italian wholesaler, legal, who would then sell to a German. Or the same bogus operator would sell to an Italian operator who would then sell to another member state wholesaler who then sold to the German. The supply line is long. And what's interesting here is, okay, here's just some of the countries, Hungary, Romania, Latvia, all these countries were involved. They're not sure whether some of these companies had the actual product or just they counterfeited the documentation. They now believe 82 products were supplied by these bogus operators. Very quickly, in 29, everyone reads Hebrew, in Israel, you can bring in unauthorized drugs through a special form, as long as it's bought by a recognized country. Germany is a recognized country, and from a pharmacy recognized by that country. But we just saw the supply line is not secure. So how does the pharmacy in Israel know that he didn't get where that came from in Germany? They don't. And that's the danger from our aspect. Let me just do real quickly. Just some of the thefts we've had within the last year. Yoram is very involved with that. 7 million shekels worth of drugs, including very important drugs, antibiotics and so on, were stolen from our warehouse in Tel Aviv. How you divert. This is Alon over there. Coming in from the Palestinian Authority, unauthorized drugs going through with counterfeit FedEx labels. Just one of the ways which things are diverted. This is another one. The label is counterfeit. This is Symbicort for asthma. It was put in every pharmacy in Israel. This particular batch never was supposed to be in Israel. Just real quickly, I'll do this and then hold it if it goes. And I thank Customs for this. Just one real quick thing. This is Ashdod port, 750,000 tablets of counterfeit drugs. It's furniture going to a Hebron person who, take a look, just this part. Furniture, 750,000 tablets. Diversion is simple. It's black tablets which contain twice the amount of sildenafil or Viagra than a normal tablet. Okay, you get the idea. We just do one other thing. These are anabolic steroids from Iran, and we found in the Jerusalem Youth Center. In conclusion, we're now dealing with life-saving, expensive drugs, not just Viagra, Cialis, and so on. The thefts are from hospitals, from trucks, and so on. Organized crime and an eradicated case terrorist group. And this is the point I wanted to bring here. When we talk to Europol, we talk to intelligence analysts in major organizations, all stated that we are correct, our premise is correct. Yeah, terror groups are involved, but it's not politically correct to talk about it, okay? And I say on the import of non-registered drugs. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mickey. Actually, one thing you learn from the discussions until now, you should not be sick in Israel or any other place in the world. The first two parts, and I refer to them as two parts of our discussion today, dealt with devices, with implants, and now with counterfeited medicines. And now we are turning to the third and the final part of our discussion today, which has to do with hospitals as such. It's connected, of course, to the movie I showed in the opening of the panel, but now we will hear from two great authorities on the threat to hospitals. The first one would be Shmuel Shapira, Professor Shmuel Shapira, who will speak about hospitals as a soft target. Professor Shapira is a full professor of medical administration at the Hebrew University Faculty of Medicine. He's also the Director General of Israel Institute for Biological Research and Chair of the Board of Life Science Research in Israel. He serves as an authority on terror, trauma, emergency medicine, and military medicine, and instructs medical students, physicians, EMS, medical leaders, and rescue teams on terror medicine, management of mass casualties events, military medicine, advanced trauma, life support, and risk management. Professor Shapira.
Good morning, and thank you, Boaz, for the kind introduction. From very high-tech speeches, we'll get to the ground. I'll be speaking giving an overview of more low-tech problem. But the previous speeches taught us mainly how to take life, how to kill. I'll be trying to show you very simply, very non-scientifically, very superficially, how you can save lives. I think that at this stage of the panel, I don't have to influence you that hospitals are targets. Boaz showed one video. We are aware at least of 2 cases in Israel in which there was an attempt to attack hospital, 2 suicide bombers. As a matter of fact, 2 of them were women, one of them exploded in a restaurant on the way to hospital in Haifa, a big hospital, and she was directing one hospital midway between Tel Aviv and Haifa, Hadera, and there they saw that the security was reasonable, so she skipped it. She went for a last meal to a restaurant near Haifa, and she decided that this will be good enough. She doesn't have to make another 10 minutes ride to the hospital. There was other interesting attempt that a young girl that was treated for 2 years for a burns, very severe burns in a hospital in Beersheba, South City in Israel. And she was treated, she was burned from a non-terrorist reason. She was burned in some domestic accident. And she was treated for burns, and still she was heading this hospital with a suicide belt, and she was stopped in one of the roadblocks on the way to there. So we are aware of these cases, and there were other attempts. As a physician, I believe very much, and is also one of the things that I dealt in the past was public health. I believe very much in prevention. And I think that when we talk about prevention in medicine, it doesn't matter. We can apply it to terrorism. We talk about primary prevention, and primary prevention, the most classical example in medicine are vaccinations. But in this case, primary prevention in every case is to try to block the offending events. And in case of terrorism, it's intelligence, it's lecture, it's knowledge, it's awareness. Secondly, prevention when the first line of preventions collapse. Secondary prevention is when the event happens, try to minimize the damage. And the third tertiary prevention, which is the less efficient, is dealing with the event. If we still remember in the clip that Boaz showed at the beginning of the day, is that I think that this clip demonstrates very well the collapse of all levels of prevention. All opinions that I'll present are my private prejudice, biased opinions, and I don't represent here anyone, just myself. Yeah. For me, everything started very, very early. the connections between medicine and terrorism. I was aware of it in 1975. You can see me here. As you can see, I haven't changed much during these years. I look almost the same. Everyone knows me. That's why I put the arrow. But it was a very bad event in Jerusalem. I was a second-year medical student. I work as a medic in Magen David Adom. Magen David Adom is our emergency medical system. In Israel, it's the EMS. And I was working there as a medic. And there was a Zion Square, is a square in the mid-Jerusalem, very central location in Jerusalem. And there was a booby trap refrigerated that exploded there and killed 15 people. The interesting things about this event, there are many interesting things, but one of the interesting things that in the medical literature, not medical, the terrorism literature, they say that one of the senses that is the perceptions that you carry for many years is the smell. As you can see, my nose is usually stuffed. It's not just this morning, but I still can sometimes perceive the smell of the charred bodies from this event. So this was my initiations into the field of terrorism and medicine. Hospitals play, of course, central role in response to terrorism, and these are just some examples. We see very often in the cases in Israel these bolts, and this is a chest x-rays with many bolts, and I have thousands of them, and I can show you. This is something you don't have to be an expert radiologist to define this one, and certainly the neck is not a place for a nail, and all this is interesting from the other points of view. It's a totally different ballistics. This is a leg. This is a leg of a victim, terror victim, with many penetrations and exit wounds from a metal garbage. And this is for people in medicine. This is very, very the most typical chest X-ray from blast injuries. And I just heard on the way in the news there were traffic jams, so I had some 2 or 3 news to listen to. They were talking about some event in the north of Syria this morning with 60 kills, and they said that there might be chemical involvement of this. And why did they say chemical involvement? Because they said that some of the bodies were intact. So this is example, and certainly it doesn't mean that it's chemical, but an intact body can be due to blast. And this is a very typical chest x-rays of blast injuries to the chest, what is called with a lot of imaginations, that this is the butterfly pattern. All these areas of the lungs, this is the heart, all these areas supposed to be black like this because air in x-rays is black, and you see all this blast pattern, and this is the most challenging injuries to take care of, blast injuries of the lung. During the last conflict in Gaza, we saw another very wrong utilizations of hospitals, to shell from them, to shoot from them, and certainly this is not the roles of hospitals in the combat of terrorism. This is the role of hospitals in inducing terrorism. There's something very typical. The institute that I work was expert in this. And there is a danger with things that he said, it's a piece of cake syndrome. For me, it's nothing. I deal with it. Tunnels are for me nothing. Rockets are nothing. I can deal with anything. And then we arrive. ABCD, usually in medicine, is used for acronyms for resuscitation, for trauma, non-trauma. But usually we arrive, we blame, we criticize, and we disappear. We are very good of this, and this is something that we try to avoid. Again, the first lectures really were excellent lectures, and I don't want to repeat again how vulnerable we are at hospitals and other medical institutions. But just to give one example, and I'll say a few words about cyber terrorism later, hospitals are very high-tech environment. Very high-tech, very delicate environment, and you see just a typical, and I can put much more sophisticated pictures of operating theaters. Today we have the robots and everything, and everything is very technical. And computers advance a lot, like you said, but we all remember the preparations for the 2000 bug. Whether it was real or wrong, I don't know. But then we try to map at our hospital all the medical equipment, and everything is dependent on computers. Today, one of the things when I was running, and I ran quite many drills or hospital drills to cope with terror or mass casualty events, one of the things that I would go in the blood bank And everybody, and all the blood bank is computerized. And tell them, okay, now we don't have computers, and now go back to the papers, the pens. Nobody knows how to use them anymore. I have an 11-year-old nephew who is half genius, but he cannot write. He cannot write because he cannot use a pen. He writes perfectly on the computer. So if you go to a blood bank that don't have computers, everyone can understand the consequences of this. So I'll go to the simple things, not to high technology. Hospitals have many entrances. And many of them, if you are abroad, in most countries, are always shocked. I'm preparing to open my bag at the entrance to a mall, or to open my bag when I am visiting a hospital upstairs. There's no one there. But even some of the entrances are watched. The level of security there is very, very low. And every day I work there, like Boaz mentions, I work as a deputy director of a hospital in Jerusalem for a big hospital organization in Jerusalem for quite many years. And one of the things that every morning I would come and enter, and I would try to think as a terrorist. It wasn't my task. It has nothing to do with security there, but I would try to think if I was a terrorist, how would I enter this hospital? And I always thought, oh, it's so simple and so easy. And there are thousands of ways. Of course, I will try not to give too many ideas this morning, but certainly to enter a hospital, even in Israel, where hospitals are watched and there are security offices, it's very, very simple task. Hospitals have mass traffic. Big hospitals in Israel, and some of the hospitals, they've done some statistics, there will be a traffic of something like 20,000 people a day. It's like a small town, and the security is like the poorest farm in Africa, maybe. There's mass traffic. There's traffic of patients. There is staff. I'll go back to the staff, visitors, students, medical students, nurse students. All hospitals in Israel today have some shopping malls. Many among the world have shopping malls, and people are just coming there. There are 10,000 of people and hardly any security. I want to talk about staff. You wear a white coat in a hospital, you put a stethoscope around your neck like all the ERs and everything, and you can do everything. And many things, people don't do it much for terror, but people doing it for sexual harassment, things like this. You work in war stethoscope and this, put a badge, and you can enter everywhere. And in hospitals in Israel, people that has nothing to do with the staff were caught in operating theaters and in other places. So staff is very, very, and also when people are trying to recruit staff, nobody looks at your past history. They look if you have a nice CV, if you wrote 3 articles about the certificate of some medical school that you graduated, but nobody tried to look at you for any security. And even if there's some very superficial surveillance that you don't have a record in the police, this means nothing. Jack the Ripper acted 150 years ago, and I don't think that he had a record in the British police. So you can have them. We can all recruit them. And just one brief example, and I'm sure there are dozens others. One of my colleagues, my basic training is anesthesiology. One guy that was trained with me in anesthesiology, he was from Gaza. When Israel was with better terms in Gaza, he would come to live with us for four days in Jerusalem, then go for the weekend, Thursday to Saturday to Gaza. In March, I'm talking about the end of the 80s. And then like 3-4 days after he finished residency at our hospital, he was arrested in Gaza as one of the first Hamas members. So this is what we cope with. It's very easy to enter in hospitals. I talk about guns. People wear masks, operating masks. If we talk about, thank God we didn't have one. If we talk about a real toxic event, or if we talk about drill, certainly nobody knows who is wearing these garments and these gowns. Emergency vehicles. In pre-hospital events, hospitals are entering the hospital, all of them with siren. It can be fake ambulance. It can be stolen ambulance, and ambulances have been stolen in Israel many, many times. It's one of the easiest things, and you just get like in the movie. You don't need private car. You bring your whole ambulance carrying some kind of explosives. Cyber terror. I think that we talk a lot about cyber terror, but I think that this is one of the really weak, very weak points of hospitals. Because even, it's very rare the director of a hospital would even consider security, and I'll mention it in a second, but even if they think about the officer and how much they pay them. Nobody thinks about computers at the hospital, and again, we saw how they are everywhere. So medical confidentiality. It's very typical that you see a computer and we protect I'm not talking about terrorism even, I talk about this medical secrets of our patients. It's very common and it looks like a joke, but this I saw many times in real life. There is a yellow sticker, white sticker on the computer, and the password is something very, very sophisticated. You don't have to crack it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 or something like this. Here there is a sticker on this computer. It's called Kita. Kita is class A111. I'm sure that this is the password, but there's no medical confidentiality, and nobody is doing anything with this. I mean, to enter a hospital in Israel and to get data from the computer, it's the easiest things. Sometimes, and it always offended me, like when the Prime Minister Arik Sharon was hospitalized at my hospital, so they gave him some fake name and fake ID number that nobody will read from curiosity. His chart, it's not really, his blood is not bluer than my blood. My privacy is as only as the Prime Minister or Minister or anyone else. So this is a problem. And one thing that is very interesting, and this is a very recent quote from the Rand Institute review, and we were talking today a lot about insulin pumps and a lot of pacemaker, and you talk from the offensive point of view, but they mention it, and the quote mentioned it as a optional gate to the internet. And they say that, and today the big buzzword around in the computers world is the Internet of Things. It means that you can choose your ice cream 10 minutes before you get home. You can defrost it or do whatever you want, not with an ice cream. And they said that everything from insulin pumps and pacemakers to cars, toaster, refrigerator will offer malicious hackers networks points of entry. So this is another aspect, and I think we should remember, and this is just a quote for like months ago, something like this. And we all know, and I learned many things at the IDC. One of the things that I learned that the term terror theater, and this is one of the things I didn't bring pictures, but there are many pictures when all the media coming to the hospital and the director of the hospital or anyone brief them, and something happens to them, and they all gather together and they all crowded together. And again, it's like with the gun. If you carry a camera, you carry a tape recorder, you have some, I don't know, Fox News badge or some other networks, you can enter and you can do everything. And certainly one of the attractions of hospitals attracted is the visibility of something like this. And nobody can thought, I mean, we in Israel, we forgot our belief in ethics of terrorists or moral of terrorists years ago, but certainly today when everyone's seeing these wonderful clips of the ISIS from the Syria and other places, nobody will believe anymore in ethics and protection. One of the very delicate targets at hospitals is energy centers, medical gases, and piping. And just think of something that happens sometimes inadvertently, and if someone doing it inadvertently, if he can change just the pipe in the hospital of the oxygen, one of the main pipes of the oxygen and nitrous oxide, and just change them all together, you can kill till anyone will perceive that something happens. You have done your day. You can go to the hospital cafeteria, take a rest, and then go home. So this is one of the delicate cases in the hospital. And if you go to all this battery of gas tanks in the hospital, you'll find them really in the most neglected area of the hospital. They put them far away because you don't need them clear. Nobody, just but God and two maintenance people know where they are. And if you want to get to them, it's not very hard task. And one of the things that you have to remember, we are all security enthusiastic here and terrorism enthusiastic, but security is really not part of the core business of any health system. It's not, nobody cares about it, and no hospital director will be evaluated by if security is effective or not effective. Will be evaluated by the budget, but maybe that he done this year 10 liver transplant or something like this. But hospital is really not the core business, and it's a problem. Even when there are security people, it looks like this. Another aspects that haven't been mentioned today, that it was hinted a little bit, maybe about the pharmacy, that hospitals can serve as a resource of weapons. Not the best weapons in the world, but a resource of weapons. And I'll just give very briefly some examples. Toxic materials and waste. And if you go to get some chemicals and everything, the hospitals, again, even without white gun, with white gun you can do everything. You can try to transplant the liver, but certainly you can go into one of the chemical labs and take whatever you want from them, and some of the things might be useful if you know what to do with them. Pharmaceutical, I won't repeat it. A lot was talked about pharmaceuticals, but again, you don't even have to get from Romania some fake drug. You can just change 2 cups of the patients and you can create some havoc. Radiotherapy, one of for me it's a very important threat, and I think that the Ministry of Health should consider it to get, again, it won't be a massive effect from the casualties point of view. But certainly from the media, from the terror, from the fear, it will be to get into the radiotherapy department of one of the hospitals, to steal a source, and probably we can just with a small pin open the lock there. If the door is even locked, you can take some cobalt salt and have a source for gamma emissions, create your dirty bomb or anything else. All this really is a piece of cake to do it, especially if you don't care about your health and you are in your head setup, you are a suicide bomber. But even if you are not, it's something that it's very, very simple. And again, like talking about the chemical war, microbiology labs in hospital, there are many nasty microorganisms for patients, Petri dishes that are cultures. Certainly, if we talk today about Africa with the Ebola, and I'm sure that if someone is really considering to steal something, to get a source, probably can just go to Africa and get it. And just to mention, really, I don't know really whether it was confirmed or not. Again, it was written that a laptop was found in Syria like 2 or 3 weeks ago with some program to disperse plague. So what do we do? Again, very simple things. Most of them are not expensive, just 5 minutes every day. Awareness. And I think that hospital CEOs, medical organization CEOs should know that part of their accountability is security. It's not just budget and medical glory. It's simple things, and this is part of their chores. Of course, you should do risk assessment. The budget is limited, and like every risk assessment, you should consider the probability and the consequences. And I think that certainly in Israel, but I think that in most Western countries today, the probability is certainly not low. I don't know how much to estimate it in North America or anything like this, and the consequences can be very bad. Both from mostly from the fear and the psychological impact, then from the health impact, but in some cases also from the health impact point of view. Education. So we always educated the people that are convinced. Nobody that is not interested probably is sitting in this room. But again, awareness, something that we know in Israel, and we are good in Israel, watch suspicious objects and activities and report. And this is a very simple modes. If you educate your staff, we do it. In Israel, we are quite trained with this. We should have contingency plans. Contingency plans for the blood bank is to use a paper and pen, not not expensive, something that you have to be just practice once every other year, so not just practice with computers, but practice without computers. Knowing what you do if there is attack to the hospital, how do you contain the attack and not have attack from 3 ports at the same time. Certainly this, a ship like this can be contingency plan, but this is, things can be much simpler and much cheaper. You have to practice things with drills. We're doing the drills. All of our drills is for the medical teams, for the emergency room people and everything, but we should, part of the drills, they should be multidisciplinary, and part of the team for the drill should be the security people in and out of the hospital. Fences. In Israel, we are good at fences. Most of them are, it's very easy to bypass them. Some surveillance cameras, like it was mentioned before, but if there's surveillance camera, you want also someone to watch it and not just to have it afterwards, some evidence against the terrorists, or just as a tool for the police, but also a tool for prevention. Control entries. Control entries as much as you can, and even if you cannot control all the entries to the hospital, try to change routines. So once abandon this entry and tomorrow abandon another entry, but don't abandon the same entry for days in advance, because really if you stand in the hospital and you medical students, or you just bypasser and you just watch the entry for 3 days, you know the routines, and the 4th day you can just enter here. Try to enforce ID cards for the staff. Again, we are not very good at it in Israel, and the way to do it is that the card will be useful. You cannot have your lunch without the card. You cannot enter your ward in the morning without the ID cards and everything. Try to do it. I talk about inspection. One very simple thing, lock the doors. I mean, everyone can break into a locked door, but it makes it a little bit more difficult. Maybe we'll go to the next door. Maybe at least lock the radiotherapy ward door to prevent accidents, but also to prevent stealing radiation sources. Cyber-terrorism countermeasures. It's something that people have to be aware, and I think this is certainly the weakest point of many institutions, certainly in the health industry. And I think that we should be aware, and we should try to prevent the best, again, primary preventions, that hospitals and other health facilities might be a target and resource for attacks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shapira. Actually, I think nothing is more timely than listening to our last speaker, and this is Mr. Yoram Rubinstein. All of us, I think the common denominator for all the lectures that we just gave was the concern that we raised. Different aspects of concerns, different aspects of the health industry. It's easier to raise the concern than to give the answers to those concerns. And the person who is responsible for those answers in Israel is the one who's the director of the Security and Protection Division in the Israeli Ministry of Health, is sitting with us today, and we are very privileged to have him with us and ready to share some of his concerns, some of his points of view in reference to what we've discussed. Mr. Yoram Rubinstein, as I said, is the director of the health, of the Security Protection Division of Israeli Ministry of Health. In his current position, he is in charge of regulating and conducting security operations all over the Israeli health system. I don't know how he sleeps at night, including hospitals, medical institutions, and the ministry itself, against various threats, including crime, violence, public disorder, and terrorism. He is the leading expert in the homeland security as well as cargo and aviation security, things that he dealt before. So thank you very much, Yoram, for coming.
Good morning, or is it already noon? So almost. I hope you'll keep with me till lunchtime. When I'm being asked, what do I do? and I give the answer, Security Director for the Ministry of Health, I usually get the response which is wondering, why do they need you? Why do they need security? Why do hospitals need security? I didn't get this kind of response when in my previous job. When I was the security director of an airline, nobody wondered. I guess it's very obvious that you need security in an airline, as well as it's obvious that you need security in crucial facilities and many other places, but not in hospitals. It's not so obvious. When you talk about security in hospitals, people mainly regard and think about violence, about criminal affairs, not so much about terror. And this is what I want through this presentation to answer, in fact. Why do we need security? Why do we need security in hospitals? And I'm going to talk more about the basics, or the old school security maybe. Not so much about the sexy cyber terror, but it's also related to the basics of security. We have to remember that, because after all, sometimes to be able to get to the infrastructure in order to put the bug in it or the virus to it, you have to go by foot, and you have to reach there. So if you neglect the security, the physical security, you might do wrong. You won't be able to protect, and you should approach all security in a holistic way. Let me start with clues. I like to talk to give the words of Sun Tzu. I don't know really how to pronounce it. I once gave a presentation in Singapore, but they were too polite to correct me, so I stay with the possible mistake. Sun Tzu says the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. And I think we have to pay attention to the clues that we are given by the enemy, by the terrorists. We tend to neglect it. We tend not to do it. And I will show you some examples. Sometimes these are not clues. They are very obvious things that they simply tell us and know us. One of the earliest clues that we saw, and was mentioned here before by Professor Shapira, was an incident which maybe some of you heard about, an attempt to attack an Israeli hospital by a suicide bomber. 2005, a young lady, young girl, 21 years old, named Wafa Samir, took a trip in the morning, went from Gaza Strip at the time towards Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, south of Israel, where she was treated before, a month before. And she had a permit to enter back, a humanitarian permit to be treated again. And really she got to the pass from Gaza Strip to Israel. Let me show you how it looked like. This is in fact, the Gaza Strip, the Erez passage to Israel. And you see here, the lady, they already knew she was coming through intelligence. And in fact, they had the knowledge that she's coming, and that's the reason they stopped her already here. They're asking her, she has a permit, she's showing them. She was very cool. You can notice that she's not afraid. She even told the security at the beginning that everything's okay. She has a permit. She has to go to a treatment in Israel. And they asked her to take off her clothes in order to check her. At this stage, she wasn't able to do harm to anyone. You have to remember, she's isolated. They are looking at her through cameras. watching her, telling her what to do from far, and you can see under her belt, fur trousers, over there, 10 kilograms, in fact, of explosives that she was wearing on her. Now, at this point, she's trying to explode herself. This shows you something about the way these terrorists, these people who are going to commit suicide, are already are so dedicated to the cause. They don't care to die. She didn't care to die. Even she knew she's not going to harm anyone. Anyone is not going to die with her. She was so focused on it that she tried again and again to explode. Now, in fact, this is for us, I guess, one of the first clues that shows that hospitals are really targets, and she confirmed it in her investigation. We saw something recently. If you say that this was, sorry. Okay. Let me show you something which is very recent. What we see here is an ambulance in the Gaza Strip now from the recent fighting in Gaza. And you see here Hamas members using an ambulance as a vehicle, as an operational vehicle, military vehicle. Simply going inside it, driving it, and the only reason that they weren't struck from the air because the Air Force wasn't sure that there wasn't anybody innocent inside with them. But still we see that the terrorists have no problem of using medical equipment, medical facilities, hospitals, attacking hospitals. And I think that one of the things that we have to remember and we have to focus on is really the understanding that the morals of terrorists are very different of the ones that we are using. I mean, they are very different from the ones that we have in the Western society. When we think about war, when we think about protection, as has been said here, we tend not to believe that someone might attack a hospital. It is against our basic morals, the basics of the laws, the international laws of war, and we have just to change, to switch the disc that we have when we're facing terror. And this is the key to the understanding and key to the awareness. And I think that the main thing that I will try to do here is to really raise the awareness, because the awareness is essential. This is the beginning of everything we do. Without the awareness that terror can attack us, we can't do anything. We won't succeed in anything. Now, when we're talking about hospitals, and Professor Shapira mentioned it here and described it very, very well, hospitals are very difficult to protect. The protection is very difficult. Many entrances, many people going in, have to go in. We have many limitations, and in fact, it makes them easy targets. What I'm showing here is, in fact, it's not an equation, it's more like a logical phrase which shows that, in fact, because it's difficult to protect them at the end, they are very attractive to terror. As then we understand, they have no restrictions to do it. Now, let's deal with some basic questions. What do? We understand that we want to protect hospitals. And we'll start from the concept. In fact, this is the end, and this is why I called it backward analysis. The end would be the concept of what we do, what shall we do. In fact, we have, like we like to divide it here in the military in Israel, 3 basic elements of security, of the concept: means and technology, security, human resources, and procedures. The order is not important in all, they are all equally important, and in fact we have to combine them together. Now we have to decide what to do with them. What are the difficulties? We have to remember first what can't be done. Technology is very limited. Our technology, the technology that can be used in hospitals, is very limited. We don't know today, we don't have really a technology that is capable very fast in high true output, give us solution to checking, to controlling people, bags. We don't have the capability. We have to remember that because hospitals are open environments, as you see, which access to them has to be unlimited and fast. In fact, we don't have a technology that can give us these solutions. We don't have a real technology that can check for explosives very fast. And the technology that exists and does it is very expensive. The problem of budget is known to everyone. We have a limited budget, so we can't really use a very expensive technology, especially when talking about security that is not the core business, as Professor Shapira said here. So obviously we won't get the budget to buy very expensive technologies. So first of all, we know that we have these limits, and we have to deal with them. Again, Sun Tzu, I like him, said you can ensure the safety of your defense if you only hold position that cannot be attacked. Okay. So of course this is not the case for hospitals. I can tell you that from my experience, although hospitals are not a major target for terror, and there are probably targets which are more attractive, and we are not talking about the high end of security, because when we deal with other very critical infrastructure, military infrastructures, the security means would be on a higher level. When we talk about aviation, you have security which is very complex, very high-end, high-tech technology. Still, when dealing with security for hospitals, for medical environment, for the public environment, it is much more difficult to do the security because of the limits that we have. If you think about it conceptually, if you want to secure a facility which is for instance, an infrastructure, a critical infrastructure, it's very easy. First of all, you have the budget. Second, so you can use the technology, you can build high fences, you can add the technology to the fences, you can hire the best people to do the security, you can limit access. And this is a key factor. You can decide who is going in and who is not coming in. You can check everybody as much as you like. You can install them for an hour and check them and make sure they don't get anything inside the facility. You can take their cell phones away. You can do whatever you like. You can't do it in a hospital. You have to let anyone go in. Sometimes it's crucial that you give him access as fast as possible, because it's a matter of life or death. And this is the purpose of a hospital, to be able to give immediately the medical treatment. So when we are thinking about the security, we have a very, very big dilemma here. How to do it, how still to protect the hospital, and still letting the hospital do what it has to do. We said that we have limitations of budget. We don't have the budget. Still, how do we get it? How do we get the resources to do the security? We have, first of all, to prove the necessity. And this is what I'm trying to do also here, to raise the awareness. And then we have to communicate the need. management, directors, has to be aware, has to know what is the threat, and only then you will be able to get the resources and get the cooperation of the management, because this is essential to all the work of security in a hospital. And another thing that we have to do is to add value. From what I learned in all my years in security, security never can deal with only with security. For security divisions, for security personnel to be successful in what they do inside an organization, they have to do something else as well. They have to be involved in other operational tasks of the organization. And that enables them, in fact, to justify themselves better. In security, not only in hospitals and medical facilities, we have a paradox, in fact. Because if you want to prove that you are good at what you're doing, you're in a very bad position. Because when you prove it, if you are good in security, if you are doing a very good security, in fact, the outcome should be that there is no terror attack, that no one is attacking you, that no one is doing anything against you, because you deter them, because you are very effective. And in fact, during the time, the question would be asked, hey, nothing is happening. No terror attacks, no theft, so maybe we don't need so much security. We don't have to give them so many funds. And this is something that happens in organizations. So you have all the time to justify what you do, and you have to have another value, to do something else. We are lucky enough that security that deals with terror, that the measures that we take against terror are also effective against crime, are also effective against to keep public order. So in fact, we can show that we are doing an extra job, or we can give another assignment to the security officer on the ground. And in fact, most of the time in hospitals, we are dealing with public order. This is what the security officers do most of the time. A lot of violence, and that we have to do with. And it's okay, because this gives us the possibility to get more people that we train them and we prepare them to deal also with terror. Talking about, and I'm going back to the clues. You all know the picture here, I guess. It's familiar to everybody who's been here around in the last 13 years. And let me ask you, was there a clue? Was there a clue before? Was this the first attack on the Twin Towers? No, I guess we all know and all remember that only 8 years before, there was an attack, a car bomb, a truck that exploded inside the parking lot of the Twins, in order to try to achieve exactly the same thing. This is what's going on today in airports. I guess all of you should be very familiar with this, with all the procedures, with all the security procedures. But if we go back before 2001, before September 11, it looked completely different in the United States. Not in Israel, but still, it looked completely. The ones who've been here and flew and used to fly there, so knew that going on a plane in the United States at the time was no different than going on a bus or a taxi cab in New York. There was no difference. You would come, you could buy a ticket on the spot and go on the plane without any further checking, any security measures at all. Why was that? Wasn't there a threat? The threat was existing already. In fact, there was intelligence about the aim of terrorists even to hijack aircrafts inside the United States. It wasn't something new. Al-Qaeda was already existing. Everything was there. So why did we have to wait, in fact, till the horrific events of September 11? And this is, in fact, the questions that we have to ask ourselves all the time and look forward to the future. Does anybody know who Yogi Berra is? Not Yogi Bear, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra, baseball player. He's famous for his sayings, which are kind of ridiculous sometimes. One of the most famous sayings that he has was, "It ain't over till it's over." This is his. He also said once that after a game that his team lost, that the reason that they lost was that they made too many wrong mistakes. Okay. Now this may sound funny, but if you think about it, there is something to it. Because you can do wrong mistakes, and you can do good mistakes. And good mistakes are mistakes that you learn from them. Wrong mistakes are mistakes that you stay and keep doing them again and again. And we should avoid doing wrong mistakes. Now, what is the threat? I think we heard a lot about the threat. In hospitals, and it was described here very well, we have a lot of vulnerable assets in the hospitals. Terrorists, we understand, that have the motivation to attack, and we saw the video that Dr. Ganor showed us at the beginning. And we know that they have the capability of attacking the hospitals. Now, when we need, and I said it before, when we need, in fact, to communicate the need, medical facilities are potential terror targets because of all of these vulnerabilities, and this is something that we have to remember. I said that through communicating, we have to, by communicating, and we have to justify ourselves. Justifying would be through providing general operational solutions. Security officers are normally on the ground everywhere. They can do a lot of things. They can do it immediately. Many times they give solutions, operational solutions that are very, very helpful to management. And if you use it in the right way, you gain more security. And as I said, anti-terror measures are effective against crime and public order as well. Now, let me show you something, because I talked so much about violence. I want to show you. This is the entrance to one of the hospitals in Israel. Okay, this is Rambam Hospital in Haifa. And this is what's going on. No one will expect, if I would show you this video without telling you it's a hospital, I don't believe anyone would guess it. And this is what we're dealing on a day-to-day basis. But through it, and if we really use it the right way, we are getting more manpower and more capability of dealing also with terror, which is our main concern. Because we have to remember, and the term risk management was mentioned here, and it's true. We have to do the risk management. But we have, and when we think about violence against, we compare it to terror, we understand that violence is not a real threat. It's really bothering. It's really bad because it happens every day. We have to deal with it. But this is not our main threat. So we and management of CEOs of hospitals tend to put a lot of resources to deal with violence because it affects them. It affects the media. It affects the staff. They don't. It causes strikes of staff that gets hurt because of violence. So we have to deal with it. We have to give answers. They don't tend to do so much against terror because of the awareness, because the threat seems not to be real, because the threat isn't effective all the time. So, as I said, we have to be able to justify ourselves. Again, Sun Tzu. He will win who prepared himself, waits to take the enemy unprepared. Okay? So, in fact, we have to be prepared. And this is for the solution. How do we prepare ourselves? And I say it very briefly because I don't want to, I can give a 1 hour lecture about how to do it and how to prepare and what are exactly.
You have 5 minutes, not 1 hour.
I understand. I understand. And these are some basic principles that we have to use because of all of the limitations that we have. First of all, we are using security layers. And the concept of security layers is based on the fact that we know that we don't have one good solution. We don't have one possible layer of solution that will give us the answer. We can't deal only by building high fences with technology on them, because you can always go through a fence. You can't only rely on security measures and on the security checkpoints, because always someone can penetrate. We have to remember that, as I said, technology is limited. We are using metal detectors, but explosives are not metals. So it's very easy to get explosives into a facility which is checked, which is guarded only with metal detectors, and even with screening machines, because it takes you need a very, very high level of professionalism for screening to be able to find explosives, and even then it's not always possible. So that, as I said, one security layer is not enough. I can do a few things on one layer, and I have to rely on other layers. What are the layers? For instance, we have to rely on information, and we have to remember as a basic fact that most of the time we won't have it, because we won't have any information about, or most of the time we don't get information about attacks, about terror attacks. This is a basic assumption in security. We will be able to rely on some of the forces outside our facility. We have to rely on another layer, which would be the layer of the entrance, checking, screening, and in fact checking the people that are going into the facility. And we have to then put some other layers, additional security officers which are going inside the facility, which will be able to give, to respond to an attack, or even to find an intruder or someone who is trying to attack. Combination of man and technology. Neither technology by itself, neither human power by itself can't give us the answer. We have always to rely on both of them, and we have to remember that, after all, technology is always operated by someone. We have to give them the right training. We can't just put cameras. We need to put someone who is watching the cameras and is able to communicate to someone who will be able to respond to an event. Behavioral pattern recognition. As I said, just screening is not enough. You can go through screening without any means. And it was said here, for instance, that we have shopping malls inside the hospital. So you can go into the hospital and buy a very big knife at the shop inside the hospital. or get some kind of improvised weapon inside it. So it won't help. Your fences are not foolproof, so someone can throw a bag over a fence with some explosive materials inside it, go like this go through this security check, and get this explosive inside and operate. So what would be the answer for that? The only answer for that is really focusing not on the means of attack, but more on the person, more on the intention, trying to find the person who has the intention. And this is what behavioral pattern recognition is all about, trying to find the signs of a person who has some malicious intent. Security awareness was mentioned here, and it was part of the title of this talk. And I think this is one of the key factors in having a high security. And when I'm talking about awareness, I'm talking not only about security personnel, we're talking about staff, we are talking, of course, about management, and we are talking also about the people who are coming in, about the general, about all the people who are, in fact, all the society. This is something that we have here in Israel in a very good way. But this awareness gives us information and helps us in doing the security. The last thing would be active security approach. Security, a lot of times, and also because of the way it's done, protection, the term is passive. We are waiting for the attack. We are waiting for someone to attack us, and only then to respond. But we need to be able to have an active approach. We need to do things actively against the possible attacker. We need to, in fact, to do it not only in the checkpoints, not only in the entrances, not only in the gates. We need to be able to approach someone who is already inside the facility and check him because we see some kind of signs that we found through the behavioral pattern recognition. So this is also very, very important. And this approach is something that you have to put into the minds of the people, of the security people, and train them to do it because it's not obvious. To summarize, again, Sun Tzu. Therefore, under the laws of war, do not assume they will not come. Rely on what to prepare for them when they come. Do not assume that they will not attack. Rely on how it won't be possible to attack you. And with these words, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yoram. I think we actually covered a whole good deal of knowledge in reference to the growing threats, and I think they are growing, of security threats and terrorism threats to the health industry. I would like to, first of all, thank all of the participants. We can entertain one or two questions if you have any, and then we will take it from there. Yes, please. Present yourself, please.
With the health system itself, I mean, it's not a problem that we have to deal with by our own. And this is more of a national security question that is dealt by the authorities of national security. So I can't, of course, the threat exists, and we know the threat, the chemical, the biological threats we are familiar with, but again, the answers are not within our system.
I think you don't want to refer to it. Okay, so since Shmuel doesn't want to refer to it, and since you didn't ask me, but I'm an Israeli, so I'll tell you what I think about it. And I do believe that the threat is there. We know that ISIS is involved in region of conflicts where I wouldn't say saturated, but the presence of chemical weapons is there. And I tend to believe that it's a matter of time until, if not already, they would put their hands on those dangerous chemical capabilities. We know that they are eager to have scientists that will help them to know what to do with this material or other activities. And therefore, I would say at the eve of 11th of September 2014, that not only the terrorism not going or not seems to disappear, I would say we are at the beginning of a new phase of terrorism in the region and globally, which probably will introduce concretely the threat of chemical terrorism to the world. And I think that the organizations which today are active in Syria and Iraq, namely ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra and maybe other organizations, will be the one that will introduce this challenge to the international community. Among experts of counterterrorism, this debate of chemical and biological terrorism was debated for many years. And in many cases, the question was, would they be able to produce this? Would they get that from a friendly country? And so on and so forth. Nowadays, this is not the question anymore, because the question, would they be able to put their hands on this material? And although the Americans have done whatever they can in order to neutralize most of the quantities of chemicals, still we need to believe that some sums of material is still there, and they don't need tons for that. They need few kilograms altogether. So I think that your question is very relevant. I'm not an expert for water supply, but I don't think this is the first threat that Israel should be worried of. Maybe if you talk about very local water reservoir, but not the national water reservoir. Bracha, you want to say something? I think that your remark is very interesting. And again, this interdisciplinary discourse that we are conducting here, because you are a biologist and you are an expert in the field, and you are saying that from the point of view of the capability, it can be done even very primitively by terrorists or by simple people. Then you actually hand over the question to experts of terrorism like myself and others in this conference with the question, although they have the capability, would they do that under the consideration that this would be a loose cannon and might hurt them and their own constituency? I'm not so sure that the answer is totally negative. It depends on which organization, under which conditions, and so on and so forth. So I think this discourse needs to further being explored. Yes. But sometimes, you know, different people and different organizations have different coins, and therefore it's quite different. Thank you very much, everybody. We are now leaving to break.
Special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts from ICT's annual international conference.